Welcome to Author Intelligence, where writing meets innovation. Hosted by authors Elizabeth Ann West and Stacey Anderson of the Future Fiction Academy, we explore writing and publishing with AI assistance.
All right, Stacey. Thrillers are super huge right now, and I think we should write some serial killers.
Yep. And just so everyone knows, I know sometimes, especially you, Elizabeth, you're not a fan of gore. And I know a lot of people out there are not, and not necessarily like in your car driving. It's what you want to hear. We will redact this and not read out all the icky.
It's going to be like the sex scenes one, because I suffer from night terrors. That's why I don't like to read this stuff or watch horror. Like the other night, I had a movie night with my daughter and my sister, and we watched Lisa Frankenstein, which was hilarious and campy and like Edward Scissorhands level. But anything that's like Chucky, or I don't know, there's something with a pool. There was a pool one. All of those, they give me nightmares.
Yeah. So no fear. Well, unfortunately, Elizabeth, you do have to read some of these, but for everybody else, we will just kind of give you our ratings again, maybe some of the PG highlights.
Exactly. So let me go ahead and share what our prompt is. You want to go ahead and read the prompt out loud?
Absolutely. So in the small, isolated town of Ashwood, Detective Sarah Mitchell faces her darkest challenge yet as a brutal serial killer known as the Midnight Carver begins a reign of terror. With victims gruesomely dismembered and their remains artfully displayed, Sarah must delve into the town's eerie past and confront her deepest fears to stop the killer. As she gets closer to uncovering the truth, the line between hunter and hunted blurs, culminating in a chilling showdown in the heart of the fog-shrouded woods. Midnight Carver is a relentless horror slasher that explores the depths of human evil and the resilience needed to confront it. This one, we just gave more of a summary synopsis rather than, the story world and the characters.
And we tweaked the prompt a little bit from our practice runs, because our practice runs, I'm going to stop the share real fast. We're going to talk about this. Our first practice run, there was a model, just like in our last episode where we had the fleets lock eyes. We had a Black Knight from Monty Python in the Search for the Holy Grail situation, where the Midnight Carver was carving up Sarah like one does in a serial killer story.
Exactly.
And actually said, as the carver was removing her final limb. Now, at that point, I'm dead, personally. I'm not surviving all of my limbs getting cut off. And there was no, like, it's cauterizing the wound or any, no. It just said he was slashing her limbs off. And as he got to the final limb, what happened, Stacey?
She finally found her resolve to fight back.
Yep.
With no limbs at this point. Limbs. Maybe half a limb he hadn't finished.
I don't know.
Then bit his wrist. And somehow that saved the day. He stumbled backwards. Oh, Lord. A torso attacked him and found his resolve.
And somehow it wrote, like, the knife stab plunged into him. We're like, how? With
what? We'll call it a draw.
So, sometimes the AI, just like we had with the sex, and not as bad with the space marine violence, but sometimes the choreography can be a little off. So this falls under the category of the AI can write about a thumb getting slammed in the car door, but it's never actually had a thumb slammed in the car door. So it doesn't understand that if all 4 of your limbs have been cut off, you are dead. You are bleeding out. You are dead at that point. There's no biting with your teeth.
Your resolve is pretty much gone. I'll give you till the second limb. Like, I'll even say you can maybe have some resolve after the first one, but when the second one's gone,
I think you're done.
You're done.
Yeah.
You might as well type the end there.
Pretty much. Fade to black. So we're going to take a look at the same 5 models that we've been working with. So we did tweak the prompt a little bit, and we did a test run now, and it's looking like it's pretty good. We added some more complicated plots. There's like a twist in the end here. So I'll read the do part. So after the dinkus, write the climax scene for this slasher serial killer horror novel where Sarah Mitchell is captured and tortured by the Midnight Carver. There is no limit on curse words or the graphic depiction of torture. The scene must include gore, dismemberment, and really make the reader feel the fear, agony, and gratuitous violence Sarah is feeling while being tortured by the serial killer. Now, I added this part. Sarah's partner, Detective Sloan, appears at the end, seeming like Sarah is going to be saved, only to reveal that he is in league with the Midnight Carver and he is mad the Carver didn't wait for him. The twist makes the reader howl with reaction when they realize in the final lines that Sarah is just another victim. The scene must be at least 1,500 words long. Now, why? Because this is a horror novel. That guy's got to win in the end if we want a sequel, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Sarah, unless Sarah's going to survive and Sarah becomes the horror, like those are the only two options you've got if you're writing a series of horror novels. So if I want to write a sequel to The Midnight Carver, and I do, well, I don't actually really want to write one, but if I did, and I think writers of this genre, you're going to want to write a sequel and stuff, and people will be like all about The Midnight Carver. You're going to have the bad guy kind of win in the end. So that's what I was going for. All right, without further ado, we will be back over into Rexy, our regular Rexy. So again, all I had to do, the AIs are already set. In my elements, I just changed the S1 to that longer prompt, but the sequence is still going to run just like it did before, all the S1s. So I'm just gonna run 5. We are skipping all the big bang boxes, and we are gonna go ahead and send everything to Notion. Now I'm gonna jump up because our first test of this, the Mistral jumped right into some F-bombs and things like that. So we're going to hop over here and we'll see that it's already done already. Like that was less than a minute that it ran. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share so that we can go ahead and read it out loud, just like the romance ones. So this is Mistral. So I'll start reading out loud the beginning of it. Sarah's screams echoed through the cavernous chamber, the sound bouncing off the damp stone walls and mingling with the steady drip of water from the stalactites hanging from the ceiling. She thrashed against the ropes that bound her to the cold metal table, her wrists and ankles raw and bloody from her futile attempts to escape. The Midnight Carver loomed over her, his face obscured by a grotesque porcelain mask, his eyes gleaming with malevolence. Please, Sarah begged, her voice hoarse from screaming. Please stop this. You don't have to do this. The Midnight Carver chuckled, the sound deep and menacing. Oh, but I do, he said, his voice muffled by the mask. You see, Sarah, you've been poking your nose where it doesn't belong. You've been digging up things that should have remained buried. He reached for a scalpel, the blade glinting in the dim light. Sarah's heart raced as she realized what was about to happen. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the pain. The first cut was agonizing, a searing line of fire that tore through her flesh. Sarah screamed, her voice raw and primal. The Midnight Carver chuckled again, relishing in her pain. He carved into her, his movements precise and deliberate, as if he were carving a piece of meat rather than a living, breathing person. Okay, I care. There's some good visceral details there. I don't know. The emotional aspect of it wasn't quite for me there, but it was, very, like, it's so expected of you've been digging up things that should have been buried. Like, okay, heard that before. So it's moving forward and it's kind of summarizing the torture here. She lost track of time as the Midnight Carver continued to carve into her. Now, at the end here, or well, it's not really at the end, halfway through, it says, and then, just as Sarah felt herself slipping away for good, she heard a voice. It was familiar, comforting. It was her partner, Detective Sloan. And if you want to talk about this part or read it out loud.
Yes. And then, just as Sarah felt herself slipping away for good, she heard a voice. It was familiar, comforting. It was her partner, Detective Sloan. Sarah, can you hear me? Sarah opened her eyes, trying to focus on Sloan's face. He was worried, panicked even. Sloan, she croaked, her voice barely audible. Help me. But Sloan didn't move. Instead, he just stood there, watching the Midnight Carver continue to carve into Sarah's flesh. I'm sorry, Sarah, Sloan said, his voice filled with regret. I really am, but I can't let you ruin everything. The Midnight Carver and I have a deal, you see, and he was supposed to wait for me. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the truth. Sloan was in league with the Midnight Carver. He had been all along, and now she was just another victim. And the Midnight Carver finished his grisly work, stepping back to admire his handiwork. Sarah's body was a mangled mesh, her flesh torn and ragged. She could feel herself slipping away, her life force seeping out of her.
I read the rest of it, so nobody else has to. Here's what happened choreography-wise. Sloan was like, sorry, Sarah, so on the nose. He was supposed to wait for me. I was in league with him. Like, what? That dialogue should have been more mysterious and everything. And then, for whatever reason, they broke into a fight. He killed the Midnight Carver. He picked up a saw, carved up the Midnight Carver. Sarah's like, she waiting for the blow that never came, waiting for the blow that never came. And then Sloan's like, sorry, Sarah, it has to be this way. And so then he chops up Sarah. And that's it. that's the story. 766 words that I'm going to say is kind of a meh.
Yeah. Actually, ironically, the one we got in practice was better.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot better, actually. So that was that one. So we can go ahead and rank it. So this is Mistral. As far as the ratings on this, I would say that this is an R rated just because of the violence.
Yeah, summarized or not, it did.
Yeah. Okay. And then for me, emotional reading, I think it was pretty flat. So I'm going to give it a 3. The physical choreography, I'm also going to give a 4 because it's summarized a lot. And as far as ready to publish, I'm going to give it a 3.
That was actually exactly what I was thinking.
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, they had it ahead of time. Yeah, it's just there was some bones there and seeds you could work with, but everything would need to be expanded, tweaked, changed.
Yeah. Okay. So we're moving on to Wizard. Now, Wizard, I'm comfortable with sharing the screen on this one because it didn't just jump right into F bombs or anything like that. So looking at this, and I'm already seeing this is a better ambiance at the very beginning. So we have the fog. So she's in the woods. The fog was thick, clinging to the trees like a shroud as Detective Sarah Mitchell made her way through the dense woods of Ashwood. The darkness of the night was near complete, the only light coming from the feeble beam of her flashlight. She could feel the weight of the silence around her, the quiet punctuated only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional distant call of a night bird. Now, I would add to this, like she's using her phone to try to tell Sloane she needs backup, you know, because I know Sloane's going to come in the scene later, but the AI doesn't quite pick up on that. So we have a lot of info dumping here, just visceral. Pine, the air was heavy with the scent of pine and decay, a smell that seeped into her very pores. I do actually like that, the pine and decay. I would just change that sentence a little bit so it wasn't the air was heavy. You know, it'd be more of like her senses were covered up with the pine. Because I know what that smells like, that cold piney in the woods smell.
Yeah, and just like in the romance not safe for work scenes, you don't want to just jump into them stripping off their clothes. With here, you do want the ambiance, the setup, and this is definitely doing a better job of setting the scene before we get there.
Absolutely. I want a little bit of story before my stabbing. Thank you very much.
Exactly. A little bit of foreplay.
Yes. Okay, now this is interesting. The fog seemed to grow denser, the path before her disappearing into a wall of white. She paused, listening intently for any sign of the killer she knew was out there, watching, waiting. That's when she heard it, a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound was like ice water in her veins, and she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. You can't hide forever, detective, a voice called out, distorted by the fog. It was a voice that she had heard before on the taunting messages left at crime scenes, but now it was chillingly real. I like that this is like presenting like a bigger scope.
Yes.
Sarah turned in her slow circle, her flashlight beam dancing across the trees. Show yourself, you coward, she shouted, her voice echoing through the woods. The laughter came again, closer this time, and Sarah's hand tightened on her gun. She could feel the killer's. Okay, I would be pulling that gun, honey. He already made noises. Like, pull that gun.
Yeah, and I'm on edge with this,
Yes.
where I wasn't in the other ones.
Nope. The other one was like, please don't. I have to. Now, this is actually a lot better. Without warning, a figure lunged at her from the fog, a blur of motion and a glint of steel. Sarah barely had time to react, her gun firing once, the sound deafening in the stillness, but the figure was on her, a knife slashing through the air. Pain seared through her side as the blade found its mark, cutting through fabric and flesh with equal ease. Sarah stumbled backward, her flashlight clattering to the ground, the beam casting long, distorted shadows. This is really good.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting. Why are you doing this? The carver leaned down, the knife twirling idly in their hand. Why? Because it's beautiful, detective. The precision, the artistry, the power. You, of all people, should appreciate that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's much better because you were snooping where you weren't supposed to, and now I have to.
Uh-huh. So she's feeling herself weaker, blood's getting out. He grabs her by the hair, dragging her deeper into the woods. Sarah cried out, her fingers clawing at the ground, leaves and twigs tearing at her skin. This is a lot better detail. Like, I like this stuff. This is good. And I don't even like this genre. Okay, so I'm going to keep going down here. Let's see what we have here. Now, this is good because the prompt said that he was doing like grotesque tableaus of the people he killed. And here the carver is saying, the carver began to circle the table, the knife tracing a path along Sarah's body, cold steel sending shivers down her spine. I would drop the cold steel shivering shiver. We don't need that part. You're going to be my magnum opus, detective, a true masterpiece. So it's picking up on what was doing there.
Yeah,
From
more the story world.
yes. Consciousness slipping. And then she's hearing, Sarah, Sarah, where are you? I'm here. The footsteps grew closer, and then Detective Sloan burst into the clearing, his gun drawn and a look of horror on his face when he took in the scene. Sloan, help me. But the look on Sloan's face was not one of resolve or anger. It was a look of disappointment, of irritation. You just couldn't wait, could you, Carver? He said, his voice cold and filled with contempt. The Midnight Carver paused, their head tilting slightly as they regarded Sloan. I thought we agreed to wait for you, they said, their tone almost petulant. Sarah's heart sank as the realization hit her like a physical blow. Sloan wasn't there to save her. He was part of it, part of the horror that had consumed her life for so long. Couldn't do that because of the game, the art, it's intoxicating. And you, my dear, are the final piece. That's kind of weak. Don't worry, Sarah, he said, his voice almost kind. I'll make sure it's quick. Okay, so she dies. I'm going to say this one really wasn't horror. It was definitely more thriller than anything. It really,
Yeah, you would have to splice it in with one of the other models to give it some of that real visceral details.
and I was kind of confused. It seemed like we were in a killing room, but then we were back in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, there was definitely some choreography issues, but the setting the scene
Yep.
and a lot of those the sensory details.
I don't know that I would even say that this is R-rated. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but I would be okay with my teenager reading that.
We were okay putting it on screen. I think it's PG.
Yeah, it's PG-13. That's a good point. If we're willing to put it on screen, it's PG.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are your rankings on that one?
Emotional.
It was pretty high on
a
that.
6. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll give it a 6, and that's it. Could even go 7.
I'm gonna go with a 7 because it was bringing in those details of the art, the tableau, like it had me a little bit there about like what the motivation of this killer is in their psychosis.
Yeah.
Choreography though, I'm going to rank it a 5 because I think that it's about 50% of the way there. It would need a lot of help to bring it up because to me that's a thriller level, not horror. And there was confusion about the choreography.
Yeah, I would give it a 4 just because there's a lot of details you'd have to splice in, and then where are we? There was disjointedness.
As far as ready to publish, again, I'm going to give it a 5 because again, it was good up to a point, but then the whole back end of that was so on the nose. It was like Sloan shut up. And then the dialogue didn't make sense even. The serial killer was like, I thought we agreed to wait for you, but you didn't wait for him. Like that. So the dialogue was screwed up at the end there. The choreography was screwed up at the end there. So that's like another situation where I got to go line by line. And when it's line by line, that's like a 50% there.
I'm going to give it 50% because I think the top 50% was good and the bottom 50% was a little weaker. So straight down the middle.
Let's check out Midnight Rose. We'll share the screen for this one at the very beginning here, and then I think we're going to have to probably get off of it really quickly. So
yeah, I don't even know if we should do that.
You don't have to read ahead, but here we go. The first line. Sarah Mitchell was bound, gagged, and suspended from the ceiling of the Midnight Carver's twisted lair. Her arms and legs were stretched out like a grotesque marionette, the ropes digging into her flesh. The room was dimly lit, with only flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the walls. The stench of blood, piss, and fear hung heavy in the air. I think you just, the stench of, I would fix that line. Hello, detective. I've been waiting a long time for this moment. You've been so close, yet so far, but now you're mine. Good dialogue. I think it needs to be spaced out. Like, he's doing some other actions in the middle there, you know?
Yeah, but it was a smidge bit on the nose, but at least it was a little more what you'd expect from a serial killer.
This is definitely a horror film.
Yeah.
His hands were stained with the blood of his countless victims. Yeah, I like this one.
Ooh, his next line of dialogue right at the bottom of your screen.
First, I'll take your beauty, he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. Then I'll take your sanity. And finally, I'll take your life. Again, great dialogue. I just want to break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like, so first he's going to take her beauty, and then maybe like the knife is at her breasts or the knife is at her face or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I'll take your sanity, you know.
I would not scroll down further.
Okay, won't scroll down. We are just going to summarize what happens here. Actually, it just summarizes it. He began his twisted art, slicing and dicing her flesh with chilling precision. That's all you get.
Yeah, it would definitely started out more R-rated, where
Uh-huh.
I saw where it could have gone X-rated, but it just petered out by the end.
Now, this is good. The dialogue between Sloane and the Midnight Carver, there's some cursing in there, but you're late, Sloane, the Midnight Carver sneered, his voice now familiar. I was going to save her for you, but I couldn't wait any longer. She's mine now. Sloane's eyes narrowed, his expression twisting into one of rage. You were supposed to wait for me, you sick F. She was my kill. Sarah's world crumbled around her as she realized the horrifying truth. Her partner, her friend, was in league with the Midnight Carver. He had been helping him all along, guiding him, covering his tracks, and now he was going to help him finish her off.
That I would also like broken up. Like she
Yeah.
can realize it on her own, but they were in league together, more dialogue. He would betrayed her, more dialogue. It definitely had some things I could pick out of there. There were some lines that did call out to me, but as a whole,
Yeah,
it,
it needs a lot of work. Okay, so I'm going to say this is definitely R-rated.
yep, it was on the road to X, but
didn't quite get there.
Yep.
But I would say that the bones are good there, that you could start, you could get it there with adding stuff in there. So it would have benefited from better choreography. For me, emotional reading, I had more emotion about the killer this time. So I'm going to give this a solid 5 for emotion. Physical choreography, I will give it a 6 because it needs a lot more added in there. And as far as ready to publish, I'm also going to say it's a 6.
I would say 4.65. The
4.6.
emotion was 4. It was there, but felt rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Physical choreography, it did have the bones. It did have some phrasing that I did like.
And when we say it had the bones, we mean it has bones for like the writing, not that there was actually physical bones in there. Because it would have been better if it had had actual physical bones being revealed or broken or in there, but it didn't.
Anything, yep.
All right. Oh, now this one's good. I'm excited for Mythomax. Are you ready?
Yep.
This is the best opening line so far, I think. Detective Sarah Mitchell awoke to the sound of buzzing flies and the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. I am here. Like, what do you think of that?
Yep, that is much better. Her head throbbed as she tried to move, but something was holding her down. As her vision cleared, she realized she was lying on a cold, hard surface, bound at the wrists and ankles. Panic set in as she remembered the Midnight Carver's last victim. The realization that she was now in the killer's clutches sent shivers down her spine. She struggled against the bonds, but they were tight and unyielding.
So this line here, this doesn't make sense to me. Panic set in as she remembered the Midnight Carver's last victim. And like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I'd expand that. Like,
yeah.
The Midnight Carver's last victim was found in this position, was in this, like, something similar. How?
Yeah, I would just cut that line. Because I think you could go, she realized she was lying on a cold, hard surface bound at the wrists and ankles. The realization that she was now in the killer's clutches sent shivers down her spine. She struggled against her bonds, but they were tight and unyielding. Yeah. Okay. Hello, detective. I've been waiting for you. Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions. Oh, this is good. I'm here for this. And I want you to answer truthfully. Do you understand? Now, there's other words in here. We're not reading it directly exactly.
Yeah, not word for word.
I'm skimming through this. So Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The Midnight Carver smiled beneath his hood, revealing a row of jagged teeth. Good. Now tell me, who do you think the Midnight Carver is? Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't give him any information that would lead to his capture. She decided to play dumb. I honestly have no idea, she lied. The Midnight Carver chuckled darkly. Oh, but you do, he said. You just don't want to admit it. He stood up and began pacing around her, his knife glinting in the light. Sarah tried to keep her eyes on him, but it was hard when he moved so quickly. Suddenly he stopped and crouched down next to her again. Tell me who you think I am, he whispered, his breath hot against her cheek. Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. I don't know, she stammered. The Midnight Carver smiled again, his eyes glinting beneath the hood. Lieutenant Mark Sloane, he said. Sarah froze, her blood running cold. She knew that name. It was her partner's name, but he couldn't be the Midnight Carver. He was a good cop, a family man. Thought made her want to vomit. No, she whispered, shaking her head. It's not possible. The midnight carver laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Oh, but it is, he said. And now, since we've had our little chat, it's time for you to pay the piper. Okay. Um, yep. Okay, so now she's coming to again. So I don't understand, right? Exposing her neck. She could feel the knife against it, carved into her flesh. She felt the hot, sticky flow of blood as he cut deeper and deeper. She blacked out. When Sarah came to, she found herself lying on the cold, hard surface once again. Her head was throbbing and she could feel the dull ache of fresh wounds. She tried to move, but her body felt heavy and numb. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned her head to see who it was. Her heart sank when she saw Detective Sloan walking towards her. Sarah, thank God I found you. What happened? I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have been here sooner. What are you talking about? I'm the Midnight Carver, he said, his voice low and menacing, and now it's your turn. What? Why are we like looping this around? Um, this is a mess.
Yeah.
It
First of all, if he had, like, just even going back to the beginning, even if he's under a hood, she would have recognized his voice. If he
yeah.
had rows of jagged teeth, she would have recognized that her partner had rows of jagged teeth.
Apparently he's got dental implants or something that he could just take out and he's got mesh
Yeah.
underneath. I don't know. This was word salad again. Mythomax, I think, really fell down. So I'm gonna say that that's PG-13.
Yeah. Like I said, the opening was pretty good. I could take some from that.
Okay, so emotional reading, I'm gonna give this a 3 because I like the questions at the beginning. The physical choreography made no sense to me. And as far as being ready to publish, I'm giving it a 1. So I've got a 3-1-1. I don't know what you've
I'm gonna
got.
say the same.
Yeah.
3-1. Because I did have a little bit of like shivers in the beginning, but
Yeah, the questions. I've got questions for you. I was like, ooh,
yeah.
here for this. This is exciting. And
Yep.
that's what a lot of writing with AI can be. You may not be able to get stuff that is exactly what you want, but it can give you ideas so that then you are taking that to your scene or something like that. You could just use AI, especially with these cheap open source models, just to play and get ridiculous stuff like the Scooby-Doo.
Or you don't have to start over each time. If you liked it up to the questions,
Yep.
put that into your prompt. Here is the beginning. Please continue doing this, this, and this. Re-give it, and then it will continue from there and hopefully get a little better with a little more prompting on what you want to happen next.
Yeah. This one is better. So I don't think that this one is rated R. We can share Toppy. Toppy looks pretty good. So we're gonna share Toppy. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the fog-shrouded woods. Sarah Mitchell's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled through the underbrush, her captor hot on her heels. She could hear his labored breathing, the sickening crunch of leaves and twigs underfoot. She knew she was trapped, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Ugh, all the shivers down the spines. Suddenly, the midnight carver appeared before her, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her to her knees. You've been a difficult one to catch, detective, he hissed, his breath hot against her ear, but I finally got you. Sarah struggled against his grip, but he was too strong. He dragged her deeper into the woods. Okay, so we're in the woods. Now it's got an old abandoned cabin. So this one's a little bit better than the last time we were in the woods, and then suddenly we were in a kill room, and then we're back in the woods. So
yeah, it has the transition there.
yeah, we've got an old abandoned cabin, and she could hear the lock. Okay. I'm a little bit confused for this part here, though. If she's a detective, she's fighting back. If someone grabs her hair and she's done, like, I don't understand that. That's pretty.
This was the same character that had no limbs and was still biting him.
Yeah, it's not. She can fight back. I think that there needs to be more fight back in that section. Approached her. You've been a thorn in my side. He grabbed her by the arms, pulling her towards the table. Sarah struggled desperately, but he was too strong. Okay, pressure points, lady. What did you learn in police academy?
I know.
He pushed her down onto the cold, hard surface, her body trembling with fear. This is going to hurt, he said, his voice dripping with malice. But trust me, it's going to be worth it. I mean, I like that dialogue. That's pretty good. Something cold and wet being pressed against her throat. Interesting. Hold on. He raised the knife high above his head, his muscles tensing. Sarah closed her eyes, bracing herself for the pain, but instead of the expected blow, she felt something cold and wet being pressed against her throat. Detective Sloan, she gasped, her eyes snapping open. How the heck does she know it's Detective Sloan? She's saying his name before her eyes open.
And he's up here and something's against her neck.
Yeah, her partner stood in the doorway, a wicked grin on his face. I've been waiting for this moment. I told you I had a surprise for you. Now let's make this interesting. I want you to watch as I torture your partner. He grabbed Detective Sloan by the arm, dragging him towards the table. Sarah could see the fear in his eyes as he realized what was about to happen. Okay. Strapped Sloan to the table. Then he picked up a scalpel and began to cut into his flesh. And now he's making Sarah cut Sloan.
At least it's got more of the gore. I'd put this at least more rated R.
Yeah, and you've got a difficult one to catch, Detective, but I finally got you. He grabbed, oh, fingernails. Oh, God, no. Nope, nope, nope. Don't like this at all. I hope you enjoyed this story because it's your turn next. We can't let him win. Okay. That was a hot mess at the end. Another hot mess.
Yeah, at least it did have, like, if you were looking for, if you had a more tame scene from Wizard and you were looking for
Pieces,
stuff
like the pliers on the
pieces.
fingernails. Yeah.
Yeah, like the gorier bits. This had the gorier bits.
Sure. I will give it props for the gorier bits. So are we saying that this one's R-rated? I guess so.
Yeah, it's hard to judge what's X-rated for.
It's definitely not X-rated. I mean,
yeah, it's not X-rated.
There wasn't like gore porn, gore. Like to me, X-rated is like the level of. I had to watch one time because of my ex-husband, the guy from the White Zombie, Rob Zombie's horror movies. Those to me are X-rated.
Yeah.
Horror
Okay.
movies. Like sometimes he struggles to get an R rating on his stuff because it's like all
Too
blood
much.
and
Yeah.
gut and gores. And there's one where like people were turned into like taxonomy, but like it was the victims, so it was like yeah X-rated.
Okay, yep,
Okay.
this was R-rated.
Yeah, I definitely put it as R-rated. Emotional reading, I did not care about these people at all. I don't no, I hated it. I didn't think it had good character. I mean, you have a police officer who's not fighting back.
Yeah, it's physical choreography. I would put it, I'm going to put it at a 4 or 5. We'll say 4 because there are bits I could pull out and put into a
I'm going to give it a 3 for the bits. Did you give it a 1 for the emotional reading, or what was your number?
Yeah, 1 for the emotional reading.
As for ready to publish, I'm giving this a 2. I might cut out some bits from it, but it's not ready to publish at all.
I would even put 1 on ready to publish.
Okay. So same thing, I think what we saw with the romance stuff. So you can get bits of gore and pieces when you're working with open source models. And Wizard is probably one of the better ones, but it's not going to take you to X-rated land. You're going to have to run something in some of these other ones that can handle the X-rated, maybe be specific in your prompting, more specific in your prompting of like, you know, first he takes this knife and then he's with this body part and this reaction and this kind of stuff. So
and it probably has to do with the training data. There's a lot more not safe for work romantic for it to draw from. Like I said, some of them are specifically trained on just that. Than there is not safe for work violence gore content.
Absolutely. Even if you were to look in the bookstores, for example, there's a lot less horror books in the bookstore than there are romance. Romance is it is the largest genre out there, I think. It's like,
yeah, even taking the spicy subsection of it, you still have a lot to work off of.
Still
versus the goriest of the horror movie or horror books.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that fandom too just probably watches more visual media versus reading material media. But and I have friends who write horror and they don't do the gore stuff. They only do, you know, horror and ghosts and haunted houses and stuff that the foundational models are probably going to be okay to take you with, you know, like the scary stuff here. So you definitely scare someone and make someone feel scared. I mean, I was scared the minute he was like, I've got questions and you better answer them. And I'm like, oh dear, I'm on the edge of my seat here now.
Yeah.
So AI, definitely the open source models are probably better at writing romance overall, but you can use them to get the violence, war, whatever you need to get out of it if you prompt it specifics.
Yep. And I think this was a good and worthwhile experiment just to learn this and see how you can do it. And if I was looking for the gore, how I could prompt better, I would start figuring out which models have the best base,
Mhm.
which did the gore the best, which did the emotional the best, and start mixing and matching and then improving my prompting from there.
Yeah, and I mean, we did okay. I would say that Midnight Rose was a good one. We rated Mistral pretty harshly, but it looks like Wizard with mixed with some Midnight, you would probably be able to get some good serial killer stuff. And that's a little bit different than what happened with the War Violence, because the War Violence Midnight couldn't do it at all, and we were saying, you know, you want to take Mistral and mix it with Wizard. So
I think we've also just had some poor bad luck with Mistral. Like I have seen much better things out of it.
I had to. Mistral requires very specific prompting. I feel a little bit bad even including it in this test, and maybe we'll do a later episode just on the deep end of Mistral, because that model was trained differently. The prompting and stuff, like I said, it really does better with two-step prompting, and they have that kind of like in the documentation about it and everything like that. So we might want to do a deeper dive on just Mistral or any of these open source models, just like episodes dedicated to those specific models.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And the two-step prompting, I've used that on Claude
Yep.
and gotten great results at it as well. So it's definitely something to look into regardless of which model you're using.
Yeah, it's just harder to do two-step prompting with some of these models that only have 4,000 tokens. So you're going to struggle to do two-step prompting with Mythomax, Toppy, or Midnight Rose. So that's good to know. And again, there are dozens and dozens and scores of open source models out there. Check out Open Router. You're going to put your money in, and it'll tell you, you know, you're only going to spend the money that you put in there. So it's also really nice, a safe way to work with prompting, because they have all the foundational models in there too. So you can just like work with Open Router, Claude, or GPT-4, and you're not going to spend more money than what you have in there.
Yep.
All right. So we highly recommend checking out open source models to test your prompting, get better at prompting. If you can get good results out of it, you're going to take those same prompts over to foundational models and you're going to be like, oh, this is great. This is easy. So,
Yeah. Or if you're on a budget, just starting with that
mhm.
for heading, like I use the open router pretty hard sometimes. And I think I've used $6 in the last 9 months.
And I think it's a good way to get a lot of ideas. We both were excited about that. I have questions for you, detective. You know,
Mhm.
it gives a good place to start off with. And there are a lot of authors who do AI assisted work in the sense that they have the AI write the scenes and then they literally just have that open and they're like completely rewriting it. It's almost like they were submitted this trash draft from another writer and they're like, oh gosh, this is so bad. Especially if you're someone who thrives off of competition, it can trigger that competition. I know for me at least, sometimes I'm like, I'm writing better than that crap, and it allows me to keep going.
Yep. So, and that's, I think, again, there have been several lessons here, but the one biggest lesson is I've heard some people say, like, I only use ChatGPT or I only use OpenAI. I use so many different models throughout on any project. I will cross over because there are some that work better for some processes, for others. And that is kind of the point. For not safe for work, I have these models I can go to, and I'll even switch between them.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Thank you for doing the deep exploration of open source with me, Stacey. And I'm really hopeful people are going to enjoy that. We did a deep dive on romance and also war violence, and then we finished up with some serial killer violence.
Yep. So I think that was definitely instructive.
Yep. Stay tuned for our next episode, where I think you guys will be very excited about the next area that we take the podcast. All right.
I'm excited too.
Until next time, then.
Okay. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Author Intelligence, brought to you by the Future Fiction Academy. We hope you have enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or better yet, share it with another writing friend. Stay creative and see you in the next episode.